European arms companies recorded significant profits last year as governments intensified rearmament in response to Russia's war against Ukraine. According to new data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, known as SIPRI, global arms revenues have risen to their highest level on record. The increase reflects both expanded procurement by European states and accelerated demand within Russia itself. The newly released SIPRI report shows that the 26 largest European arms manufacturers, excluding Russian companies, experienced average revenue growth of 13%. In total, these firms generated more than 130 billion euros in sales. The data highlights a sustained trend of European rearmament following the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 and the continuing perception among governments that long-term investment in air defence, ammunition and armoured vehicles is now essential. German defence companies posted some of the strongest increases. Rheinmetall, Diehl, ThyssenKrupp, Marine Systems and Hensoldt all expanded revenues by more than one-third during the reporting period. SIPRI attributes this to heightened demand for systems directly linked to the Russian threat. These include short and medium-range air defence platforms, artillery, ammunition, armoured personnel carriers and other ground systems. European military inventories, many of which had been reduced during previous decades, are now being replenished at scale. Wide shots of the SIPRI headquarters in Stockholm underscore the significance of this year's findings. The organisation has documented global defence spending for decades, and it reports that the worldwide total for the 100 largest arms companies rose by nearly 6%. Although the figure is global, Europe's rate of expansion outpaced all other regions except Russia. SIPRI notes that the two largest Russian arms companies, Rostec and the United Shipbuilding Corporation, increased their revenues by almost one quarter. This growth is driven entirely by domestic demand linked to the ongoing conflict. Russian state procurement has surged as the military seeks to replace battlefield losses, expand artillery and missile stocks, and sustain high-intensity operations. Footage from the plenary session of the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, attended by Russian President Vladimir Putin, reflects Russia's continued commitment to large-scale defence production. Images from Ufa, including scenes of former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev visiting a recruitment centre, illustrate the wider mobilization environment inside the country. Russia continues to combine industrial expansion with renewed military recruitment in order to maintain operational capacity along the front. Meanwhile, European nations have dramatically increased orders for air defence systems designed to protect cities, energy infrastructure and military installations. Rheinmetall's expanding ammunition production capacity highlights a central aspect of current procurement, the need for sustained supplies rather than one-time purchases. Diehl's air defence systems and Hensoldt's sensor technologies are also witnessing increased demand as states seek integrated surveillance and interception capabilities. The rearmament trend is also visible at sea. In September 2025, the military exercise known as Red Storm Bravo took place in Hamburg. The footage shows ground units manoeuvring as part of a joint readiness operation. European armed forces have multiplied such exercises over the past 2 years, combining conventional training with simulations of hybrid and missile threats. Naval modernization programs, such as those undertaken by ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems, further demonstrate the priority placed on rebuilding long-term maritime capacity. In Unterlüß, in northern Germany, where several major defence facilities are located, new production lines and training grounds reflect the industry's response to demand. Scenes of armoured vehicles undergoing testing indicate the shift towards sustained manufacturing rather than limited procurement cycles. For Germany, this marks one of the most significant expansions of defence industrial activity in decades. On the global stage, rising arms sales are linked not only to the conflict in Ukraine, but also to broader geopolitical tensions. The SIPRI report notes that long-range missile strikes, drone warfare and extended artillery duels have reshaped defence planning in multiple regions. Wide shots of the guided missile cruiser USS Philippine Sea launching Tomahawk missiles during a 2014 operation illustrate the enduring relevance of precision strike capabilities, which remain in high demand among US allies. Back in Stockholm, SIPRI senior researcher Nan Tian is seen reviewing the final version of the report. His role includes analysing long-term trends such as supply chain bottlenecks, workforce shortages, and the strain placed on production lines as countries accelerate procurement. According to SIPRI's analysis, many manufacturers are now operating at full capacity, requiring significant investment in new facilities and skilled labour. The report states that despite the growth in arms revenues, European production still faces challenges. These include competition for raw materials, financing for new production sites, and balancing domestic requirements with export commitments. Several states are implementing long-term framework contracts to ensure predictable purchasing schedules for ammunition, armoured vehicles, and air defence systems. For European governments, the motivation behind increased procurement is clear. The conflict in Ukraine has demonstrated the scale of materiel required for modern warfare. High consumption rates of artillery shells, anti-missile interceptors, and drone systems have surpassed many governments' initial estimates. As a result, procurement policies now emphasise stockpiling, sustained production, and multi-year contracts rather than short-term deliveries. SIPRI's reporting also underlines that while demand surged immediately after the invasion, subsequent orders are part of a longer-term restructuring of European defence posture. Budgets have grown accordingly. Many European states have committed to spending at least 2% of their GDP on defence, aligning with NATO guidance. Increased procurement from domestic firms reflects both strategic priorities and industrial policy aimed at strengthening local supply chains. From a global perspective, the near 6% rise in combined revenues of the world's 100 largest arms companies indicates that rearmament is not limited to Europe. The report cites procurement programs in several regions, including East Asia, the Middle East, and North America. These programs involve a mix of modernizing existing fleets and acquiring new capabilities to address emerging threats. Russian industry remains focused predominantly on domestic fulfillment. Footage of the Eastern Economic Forum shows President Vladimir Putin speaking about economic resilience amid sanctions and wartime pressures. Although specific production targets were not detailed in the footage, the near-quarter growth reported by SIPRI indicates sustained state investment in weapons manufacturing. Scenes from the recruitment centre in Ufa provide additional context, showing Russia expanding both industrial and human resources. Former President Dmitry Medvedev's visit reflects ongoing efforts by Russian officials to monitor mobilization centres and reinforce narratives of national readiness. Across Europe, industrial zones like Toulouse illustrate how civilian regions have become hubs of defence activity. Testing ranges, manufacturing sites and assembly facilities are increasingly central to European security planning. Companies are investing in rapid prototyping, digitally manufactured components and updated assembly lines optimised for large volume production. These developments represent a significant shift from pre-2022 conditions when many European defence budgets were stagnant or declining. The Red Storm Bravo exercise in Hamburg demonstrates how European armed forces are incorporating new equipment into operational training. Forces practiced coordinated manoeuvres involving armoured units, infantry and support elements. These exercises help militaries integrate newly procured vehicles and systems into their existing structures, ensuring readiness for both defensive operations and NATO obligations. Footage from the SIPRI headquarters marks the culmination of the research process. Analysts compiled the data from hundreds of sources, including financial disclosures, government procurement announcements, and verified industry reports. SIPRI notes that its figures reflect actual revenue, not projected sales or unconfirmed orders. This methodology provides a consistent metric for comparing year-to-year developments across multiple regions. The SIPRI senior researcher is seen reviewing printed sections of the report. His analysis highlights that while increased demand has boosted company revenues, supply constraints remain. Many manufacturers report that their ability to meet orders depends on expanded production capacity, new subcontractor networks, and increased availability of materials. Some production lines require specialized components with limited suppliers, leading companies to seek alternative sourcing arrangements. In Germany, national policy now emphasises industrial resilience. Rheinmetall and other firms have announced investments in new ammunition lines. These include facilities dedicated to producing artillery shells, infantry ammunition and components for air defence interceptors. Germany's procurement strategy includes both replenishing national stocks and supporting Ukraine through equipment transfers. Diehl, known for its Iris-T air defence system, continues to receive orders from European partners seeking to strengthen defensive shields around major cities and critical infrastructure. The system has gained particular attention due to its performance in Ukrainian air defence operations. Hensoldt's radar and sensor systems are also in high demand as countries upgrade surveillance networks to detect drones, cruise missiles and other aerial threats. ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems' growth is driven by sustained orders for submarines and surface vessels. Several European states are modernising fleets as part of broader maritime security strategies, particularly in the Baltic Sea and the North Atlantic. Production timelines for naval vessels often span multiple years, indicating continued long-term revenue for the sector. The footage of US naval missile launches highlights the global landscape in which European rearmament is taking place. Long-range precision weapons remain a central element of defence strategies worldwide. Although the footage is archival, it illustrates the types of systems that remain in high demand as states adapt to modern conflict requirements. SIPRI's report concludes that while global arms revenues continue to grow, the distribution of that growth reflects clear geopolitical divides. European companies are expanding due to the perceived threat from Russia. Russian companies are expanding due to wartime state demand. Other regions are adjusting procurement to address regional tensions and modernization goals. The high-intensity warfare seen in Ukraine has reshaped assumptions about stockpile requirements, production speed and industrial capacity. Analysts note that these factors will continue to influence procurement decisions for years to come. As the footage returns to the SIPRI headquarters, the organisation's findings emphasise that the global arms industry is undergoing one of its most active periods in recent history. With defence budgets rising across multiple regions and procurement programmes accelerating, manufacturing capacity has become a strategic priority for governments. The latest report shows that global arms revenues are not only rising, but are increasingly concentrated among manufacturers capable of scaling production quickly. This trend is likely to continue as long as geopolitical conditions remain uncertain. European rearmament, driven largely by the conflict in Ukraine and the perceived threat from Russia, remains a defining factor in the current security landscape. With industrial output increasing and long-term procurement contracts expanding, defence companies across the continent are positioned for continued production growth. Russia, facing sustained operational demands, continues to rely heavily on its domestic industry to supply weapons, munitions and replacement equipment. The quarterly growth in revenue for Russian companies reflects state procurement priorities under conditions of ongoing conflict. Global arms sales, as documented by SIPRI, now represent one of the most significant indicators of shifting international security dynamics. The report's data illustrates how governments are adapting to prolonged instability and preparing for the possibility of expanded or extended conflicts. The images of researchers reviewing the SIPRI report reflect the culmination of a comprehensive process designed to provide a clear understanding of global defence production. As governments monitor supply chains and plan future procurement strategies, these findings play a central role in shaping national policies.